Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name is Clint Button, and I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 148 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. All right, this is the second video of the quoting and pricing, I don't know, series, what you're gonna call it, I've been talking about it, I've been trying to reshot, I've done a whole bunch of different segments and takes and trying to get it consolidated, and wasn't happy with them, and so I tried to get this together with a couple of pages, and we're gonna talk about doing up a quote today, and doing and terms and stuff like that. I'm not gonna I thought about getting out a quote, put that up, but that's not confidential, and honestly, I'm not interested in making up a fake one. It's not worth the effort. Maybe I should for y'all, but if y'all can't figure this out, you need to be doing something else. I'm gonna tell you what I do. One thing that I would recommend, I got this out. This one is called the National Renovation and Insurance Repair Estimator. Okay, this is a job estimator, cost estimator, that I've had for 30 years. Still got the floppy disk here in the back. But you can get one, they come up every year, and they've got all these different charts and rates for what everything costs. Like, it's got an item description, I flipped the page here, and this says Cypress entry door, standard grade, replace. It's got a materials cost, it's got a labor cost, and a labor cost in order on what it costs to install and do it. And so you can look, you got a cost to remove, cost to replace, and a total. And this, they'll have stuff, it's got finished carpentry, it's got masonry, it's got plaster and stucco, it's got roofing, it's got all kinds of stuff. This may not have anything to do with doing stone carving work, but it'll show you the process of how you figure out a quote. And it's really good to give you an overview, and you don't have to buy a brand new one. The whole point is not to have the latest price for this, because they're not gonna have prices in there on what it costs to hire me to carve a granite statue for you. That's not what this will cover. But this will give you a mindset into how to go about quoting a job and what's involved. And it's, you can buy, I assume you could probably look on Amazon and buy, used ones for almost nothing, for one that's 5 years old or 10 years old, just to have a breakdown to get some idea on what things cost in terms of relevant labor cost, and how many hours and minutes it takes to do a job. So I highly recommend getting one of these estimators just to give yourself an idea on quoting stuff. Now, when you do a quote, one of my masters says your price is your price. He says as long as you're happy, you pay the bills, it doesn't matter what you charge. As long as you can pay the bills, that's fine. I don't know what your bills are. I don't know what your overhead is. You've got to figure all that out. That's on you. Nothing to do with me. I had another master tell me, you tell them whatever you got to do to get that job coming to you, period. And don't, if you, oh yeah, they want it done in, you got to get this, I got to have this in a month. Oh yeah, sure, we can do it in a month, when you've got 6 months worth of work sitting there and you couldn't touch that thing in 8 months. He says, doesn't matter, get the job, and then after that, then you can, and I don't like that either. I think that's not very, that's not the way I'm going to do business. Let me talk about the way I write up a quote, and then we'll talk about terms that I include with the quote. When I do a quote, and I've tried different ways and different methods, this can be very complicated work to do. And it's very arbitrary, because you can work on something for weeks or months, and then have the customer look at it and go, well, I don't like that. I'm not paying for that. And so you got to have a way to prepare both you and the customer so that it doesn't end up in that situation. and I don't, you know, and so to me, that means that I'm going to try to do a relatively thorough quote and put the effort in up front so they know what I'm going to do and they know what to expect. And it kind of draws a line in the sand that if I meet these standards, then you're going to accept my job. And so when you start, when I do a quote now, and some people will just look at something and go, oh yeah, that's $600, and they'll write it down on a little post-it, and that's your quote. No, I don't think so. I try not to do just, I'll do a preliminary, if someone wants preliminary numbers, you know, I might put an email, try to put it in writing so that it's not just a conversation, unless I do business with them all the time. I try to, you know, have something where we can document it, make a note so I don't forget. There's going to be a lot of people, if you do this much, there's going to be a lot of people that you talk with, and you're going to find out that projects, they'll call and ask about something, and you might not hear from them for 6 months or a couple years, and they'll call back and say, hey, remember that draped cross or that angel or whatever we talked about? And you're going to be like, give me a minute, let me pull it up, because you know you've talked about hundreds of other jobs since then and you don't remember anything about it. So try to do something where you can keep track of it. Now what I do when I get a quote, I get an inquiry about a quote, is I will do, I'll copy their contact information on a document with the email content. You know, this is hi Clint, this is what we want, this is what we're looking for, and such, and then I'll insert whatever images they send me, so I've got it right there in the quote, and it works really well. If I have any notes or suggestions about the project based on what they ask, I'll put in a few notes, and then I'll put a quote in with the price to carve. Now, when I talk about doing a job, you know, bas relief, you know, foot per week per figure and 2 weeks per foot per figure for a full round, those are probably going to be direct carve prices, because pointing them is going to take a lot longer. If I'm pointing them, you know, I may do the 2 weeks per foot per figure for bas relief. You know, I don't know. We got to look at it and see what's involved. Then you're also going to have model expenses, you know, to produce a model. And I keep all my models. I'm set up I'm self-employed, and I'm set up, all I sell is labor. So I don't have to worry about the stone cost. I don't transport stones. I'm very focused on what I do. And so it works better for me that way. You may be set up where you're already in a business that's got a DOT number and you've got trucks hauling stone, and it's not a big deal. You know, just, you know, wherever you're at, it's where you need to figure it out. But I'll include my, you know, any concerns I have or recommendations that this stone is better for this type of project or not. And then I'll put my price very clearly and write it up and sign it to send back. In the end of it, you know, on the back of it, at the back part, I'll include my terms. Now, most of the jobs we do, because I'm working with professionals in the industry, this is pretty much all handshake stuff. We don't do signed contracts because we don't need to. Occasionally there will be signed contracts to do, and you have to make sure that if you don't know how to write a contract, you need to have somebody that can write a contract for you, or evaluate a contract before you sign it and get into an upside down situation. I'm warning you, because it's very easy to sign a contract with somebody that has no comprehension of what this work involves. They'll just write something up that makes a lot of sense when you're ordering a hamburger, and it's pretty straightforward, and it doesn't when you're doing this. And if you know, they've got some arbitrary deadline in there and you miss the deadline, and now all of a sudden they don't have to pay you, and you work for months or years and you don't get paid. You know, you got to be really careful about what can be included in a contract. So if you don't understand the contract, you got to have somebody that really knows it, have a good lawyer read it before you sign it. And the money you pay them for their expertise can save you, 5 figures or more of money, and a reputation and everything else. So, but for the work I do in the industry, we're all handshake. We don't sign contracts like that. So anyways, but I have some terms, and as I said before, I'm going to put these documents on these videos so that they're at the end, so you can screenshot them or whatever and figure them out and see everything. I've used these terms for years. They modify slowly over the years, but the same basic set of terms is what I've used for decades, and I've never had any problems. So let's just go over these, and where I've sent them all over to everybody, then I don't mind putting them here on the internet. All quotes are good for 30 days and then subject to change. Okay. I have, as mentioned, you have people that contact you about a project, and if you do memorial work, you're working around death, or somebody died, and projects don't always go. They call up and they sell next week, and you'll get the stone a week later and you cut it. That's not the way this works. These tend to drag out, and it's pretty normal to spend anywhere from 1 to 3 years on every project between the first call and when a stone is actually shipped. And things have really got to be in place for them to fly through in a year, because the schedule, that's really tight. And a lot of times you have to wait. So, but I got quotes that are good for 30 days, and I can work with that as I can. If I'm working with somebody and they call up and nothing changes, it's been a couple months, no big deal. We've had other people that have called. We had one, we quoted a really complicated project, and that was an off-site job and everything, and there was all this institute work, and they called 3 or 4 years later after the recession had hit, and they expected the same price. And I said, dude, everything's gone up. Gases cost more, everything, tires, gas, everything costs more. I'm not going to drive back and forth and do all this work for the same price. And I sent him a price that was, I don't know, like 30% higher or something like that. And he flipped out, and I said, if I quoted something, got a quote from you 4 years ago, would you do it right now? And he said, no. He said, everything's gone up. I said, okay, that's where we're at. So it's up to you if you revisit it. It says no items will be shipped from my studio before paid in full. I'm not in a position to lend credit. There's some of the industry uses, net down, 10% down, net 30, which means they put 10% down on a job to ship it, and then balance is due in 30 days. And that can be a double-edged sword. You get more work, but then you may have to chase more money. And I'd rather, when it leaves my building, I want to be done with it. I'm finished, I've had enough, I'm sick of it, let's move on. So that's just how I do it. And I'd probably have a lot more business if I had terms, but I also know that I'd probably have a lot more money hanging out there that I never saw. Payment is due in full by project completion prior to shipment, with all payments made to AC Button, North Carolina Sculpture Studio. Okay, I'm set up as an individual, as a sole proprietor. I'm just me, and so I don't maintain an account with the studio name on it, so I can't receive funds in the studio name. If you want to do that, great. My accountant, my financial advisor told me I didn't need to. I worked with a CPA for years, a very good friend from college I'd known for decades, and he provided me a lot of advice as a financial advisor that I didn't realize all CPAs didn't do that. But we were friends, and so he taught me a lot about how to maximize my income, make money, how to spend it on tools and expense it and capture it, and still have a tax obligation to where I was still paying in for like Social Security and stuff, so that it put me in a better financial footing versus just going to a local cheap tax place and spending $50 or $100 to get my taxes done, and I'd get $300 or $400 back. I could go with him, and we could get $3,000 or $4,000 back and get credit towards Social Security, and that extra, I pay $500 to get my taxes done there. Makes a lot more sense. So payments come directly to me. Projects over $4,000 require a minimum 50% non-refundable deposit to schedule before work begins. I used to be more diligent with that. when I needed money. As projects stretch out, you can work out payment terms if you'd like, but that's up to you. I would rather get paid at the end of a project now because I can afford to wait. If I'd gotten paid when this first sold, and then we spent a year, almost a year and a half waiting for the stone, and then we spent more time working on it, the money would have all been exhausted. And it puts you in a really bad position because if something happens, you don't have the money to be able to address it. So that's what I do. Full prepayment is optional. I prefer not to be fully prepaid now. Due to limited studio space, items not paid for in full and or removed promptly following completion will be subject to a minimum storage fees of $500 plus $10 per day and are not guaranteed against resulting incidental damage. I don't know, I don't want work hanging around here. I want it gone, and I want to make sure people think that I'll understand that I'll be charging them storage space because my square footage is worth money. So, and you can charge a certain amount per day, just like if you've got a vehicle stored or anything like that. All incurred expenses necessary for collection will be paid by the customer. Just putting that right out front. Any and all legal proceedings will be addressed entirely in Spartanburg County, South Carolina, so that they're local to me. If we're going to go and sue, I'm going to file right here because this is where business is being done. And I want to put a notice out there that I'm not going to travel all over to do that. I had learned that through contractual interactions with, somebody else got into, and they didn't pursue it because it wasn't enough money to make it worth driving many, many hours to court multiple times. And so it sounds good. Projects normally serviced in the order received once preceding projects are resolved. And all time quoted to produce projects is estimated in studio hours, which is 40 hours per week. I don't make estimates on calendar delivery date because I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to have 8 hours to work on a stone today, or if I'm going to have 3 hours to work on a stone today because I got 5 hours of office work. And then tomorrow I've got 4 hours of errands where I've got to go out and buy supplies to bake tools. So I can't say that if it comes here and it's I quoted it 4 weeks. I quoted it 4 weeks of labor hours, not 4 weeks of calendar time. Okay. A reasonable estimate of calendar date of completion can be provided upon receipt of the stone from manufacturer. I'll know what I've got. I'll know what's in front of it. I'll have some idea that it's going to take me 3 months to get to this, and then another month to cut it. And so I can give you an idea when it shows up. This schedule typically varies due to ongoing studio responsibilities such as quotes and customer interaction. Each project is unique. I make it clear when I'm talking to customers that if I'm talking to you, if you have access to me right now, that means whoever's job is down in the studio is waiting, and it's not being addressed right now. So that means when your stone gets here, you're probably going to be in the same boat, and I'm going to be talking to some new person about a new project, and your stone's going to have to wait. So if you want me to address your concerns now, you're going to have to let me address the concerns that future customers have when your work's here. No warranty is provided, expressed, or implied, including to schedule or completion. It's really important that you understand warranty concerns, because if you do a job and I've got, it should be all inclusions are left as found, because we've got stone, natural stone, and I don't know what's going to be in that stone, and so I don't make any warranty claims of any kind. My studio will be open to visits by customers during normal business hours and by appointment. Please contact me before visiting so that I'll be off-site with other responsibilities or appointments. I don't have a storefront of studio, and so I'm glad to let people have access when it's appropriate. I have some customers who demand total confidence, almost like an NDA. I don't know who their customers are. I don't know where the stone's going. I don't care. They hire me, I cut the stone, I get a check, and they get a sculpture, and it goes away. And that's all I know. and they're great customers. You know, I do repeat business. I got one in particular, I do a lot of business like that. That's how they want to do it, makes them happy, pays my bills, then we're all set. Items will be recreated and same as received unless prior arrangements are made at additional cost. You'll have to figure out what crating costs are for you if you've got a wood shop, if you can crate something, you know, banding materials, you know, stuff like that. And you'll have to know how to crate things properly. If you don't, you're taking on risk by crating it. So, and I do have noted here, all inclusions will be left as found with recuts charged at full price. If I carve into this stone and there's a big spot, God put that spot there however many years ago, not me. I'm not going to redo that stone for free. If you don't like it, you want a different stone, send me a different stone and pay me to carve it, and I'll carve it all over again. But that's why we try to source good stone in the first place, because inclusions, they just happen, and that's part of using natural stone. Artwork, including hand-drawn full-size detail and clay models. Prices include general preliminary sketches and a final production with some minor revisions. I will request needed reference material and use what is provided. Any or all major revisions will be done at extra charges at a minimum rate of $100 per hour plus materials, shipping and similar expenses. It's really important because people will send you images to work with. You know, we used to get, when I started, when I was working with Gary, you know, this was before computers and email stuff. We'd get stuff faxed in. You know, they fax a Polaroid, you know, and you had this horrible little image. We'd try to go through the catalogs like the DePratos and whatever and try to figure out what this posture was, the composition was, and then work with a couple models and put it all together. Now they send it on email. But we'll get pictures. We did one of a dog, and so I did all this work with the dog and said, that's not what the dog looks like. They sent us a picture, and they sent me pictures of the dog as a very, like a year-old, not a puppy, but a little dog. And then they sent pictures of like a 12 or 14-year-old dog that was completely aged and wore out and whatever, and they said, this is what it's supposed to look like after we'd spent all this time working. So you got to make sure you get good resource and reference material from your customers going into a quote so you can use it and know what you're supposed to do. So if you've got to redo it, you know, you're compensated if you've done all this work and then at the last minute they pull the rug out from under you. Without exception, AC Button retains full copyright and free use at his discretion of all work produced. That's really important because if you may have work that people want to keep secret under wraps for, you know, for an unveiling or something like that, and you need to understand where you stand in that whole discussion, because if somebody comes into your studio, clicks a picture over your shoulder while you're carving and says, hey man, I stopped and went on this, look what I did today, and they put it on Facebook, and they come back and say, hey, you can't publish that. Hey, I'll let them take that picture, they can do anything I want, okay? It's in my terms. We didn't specify otherwise. I clarified it, I made it a statement. And these haven't been vetted by a lawyer. Lawyers will undo all kinds of stuff. You got to realize you can get very technical with this. But I have a business community that is receptive to these terms. Transportation expenses will be additional to quoted prices and paid directly to service provider by the customer. I can help arrange services if needed, but will assume no responsibility for performance of such outside service providers or damages incurred. I carve, that's what I do. I don't truck stone, I don't install stone, I don't buy stone and sell stone, nothing. I carve, that's what I do. And so it's more cost effective for me to outsource this to people who have the capacity. And so I always make sure the customer understands it's up to them to provide transportation. That's their priority, that's their obligation. And if they want me to make a suggestion, I'll suggest professionals, but that's completely business between them. If possible, combine shipping on projects will help coordinate as such to lower costs for all involved. This is really important. Substitutions and or changes in design material schedule may impact quoted project, possibly making a project impractical to produce. Any and all changes need to be addressed before project initiation and approved by Sculptor. Unapproved changes, this is highlighted, underlined, italics, whatever this sentence. Unapproved changes are grounds to refuse project and or end work and retain any and all prepaid funds, no exceptions. Again, customer will be responsible for any and all incurred collection fees. It's really important that you, I can't carve a moving target. We've only had to refuse a handful of projects over the years, and based upon what the customer wanted, expected, and it's typically related to they either want some absolutely insane, huge, just they don't understand the numbers that's involved, or they can't make up their mind and they just keep changing. Oh, I want this, and then the next time you talk to them, well, I want it to be a little bit more. I want her over to the left, and then I want her 4-6 instead of 4-3, and then I want her forward with her legs changed, and I want this. And every time you talk to them, they change it, and that should be a huge red flag that you need to run away, run away, run away, get away from me. I don't want anything to do with you, because once you cut that stone, you can't change it. And if you let them keep changing what they want, the stone probably isn't going to support those changes very well. And so, you know, we had one company in particular, he'd already sent thousands. He sent a fairly good deposit. And I said, I'm done with you, because he just kept changing. I said, okay, you made the last change, I'm finished with it. And he changed it again. And I said, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to do it. And he thought I didn't want to do it because he didn't think I'd quoted it right. You know, I was worried I hadn't quoted enough. I don't care about that. Once I quote it, that's my money. I don't care. If I made a mistake, that's on me. I just understood that this person was impossible to deal with. And so you're better off to avoid a project that's going to be that difficult to cut and just find somebody else for a customer. So, but at the very bottom, it says these terms may vary depending upon project and are subject to change without notice. That's mainly there not to change terms during a project, but for customers to understand that if they come back in 6 months or 2 years, there may be amendments to this document, to these terms, so they need to read them, you know, because it may have been updated because things may have changed. So you don't need to get exhaustive about it. You have to be careful not to run people off because you've got too much to say, you know, as I talk and talk and talk. But understand that this is a business arrangement, and you need to put yourself in a position where you can be protected and you can perform consistently. But I like to have my quotes in writing, and I submit them. And you know, like I said, at this point, money's usually dragged out, you know, to the end. You may have a benefit of splitting the project if you're working it over a couple of tax years. You know, talk with your accountant and see how that works. Because if you're in process, you can take a prepayment, you know, and you know, take a payment in November and then finish it in March. And you know, if your fiscal year is January to December, you know, you can split the money into 2 years, and it may help save you on taxes instead of bump you into the next bracket for that year, because this income can vary a lot. I'm not a rich man, you know, I could have made a lot more money doing a lot of other things. We enjoy this work. I enjoy this work tremendously. There's nothing in the world like being able to come down here to the studio and find money in a stone that pays for my house and stuff like that. But you've got to set yourself up in a way that you can afford to make no money for a long period of time. And I was very fortunate. You know, I started this whole studio effort when I was, you know, early mid-30s, and I had a lot of equipment to build the studio. I had to buy a bigger ladder, but I had everything else to build the studio myself that I already owned. And so I was able to take advantage of that and build it largely by myself with just, you know, somebody handing me stuff while I was up on the ladder. And I don't know. You just have to decide. So I'm trying to get back, trying to help this work for the next generation and for people that might want to do this. I will say, if you hear people that say, I never made any money and we were broke and struggling, and then we raised our prices, doubled our prices, and now we're making lots of money and we've got just as many customers and everything. Okay, they were probably underpriced in the first place. Because, we'll talk about how this is a struggle. They say, we should raise your prices. No, I know my market. I can't. That's not the way this works. I will point out between the industry and the art community. Fine art's a whole different ball of wax. If you start getting into doing fine art, there's less of a benchmark as to what the standard value of something is. Has a lot more to do with you as an individual artist. If you're not really famous, really successful, and you're doing somewhat standard kind of work that looks like everybody else's, there will be a typical price range where work like that sells. If you're a premium and you're in demand, you can make all kinds of money. If you're bidding work for like an architectural project where they're doing a big building and they want artistic embellishment on it, you need to do some studying, because typically there'll be like a 2% of the budget to 5% of the budget is likely to be reserved for artistic embellishment of a project like that. So, if it's a $50 million building, or whatever, 2% of that budget, of that 50 million, will be put aside for sculpture work, or 5%, or whatever their number is. And do some research and find out what the going rate is, because that'll give you an idea that something that you might not be able to sell, you might have to charge $40,000 to do this in the industry, because that's going rate based on your basic labor, versus having an art piece out in the same capacity where you might be able to sell it for $150,000. And if you don't understand that, you lose a lot of money. So, but a lot of big pieces are also done as loss leaders, so artists can sell smaller gallery-sized pieces, especially reproductions, because selling originals, one-off originals, is really hard to do and make money and make a living. And I've been warned about that by one of my mentors. So, but I'll try to put these videos here on these pages here on the end, and hopefully you've heard enough and seen enough, from what I've talked about here, that it'll give you some idea on how to move forward in your operation between these two videos, and we'll just keep competing. So you're going to have to learn that you're quoting work as a young new person, and you're going to be quoting against people like me that can work faster and a lot better, and so we can probably quote it cheaper. And for you to sell, you're going to have to sell it in the range that we sell it at, as if we're doing stuff that's really fast and really quick. That's all you're going to be able to do, and you're going to have to work your way to a point where it's profitable for you to work like that. I hope that makes sense. So anyways, my name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor here at Carolina Sculptor Studio with a Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.